original motto was helping those that are helping others. You know, and you find a guy like Guy, who's in the middle of some of the darkest corners of the world, doing what he does on the daily with or without us. Mm-hmm. But with us, we're able to pour gasoline on that fire and just see that much more.
We are super excited to introduce you to our 300 Sons for Cité Soleil campaign. As you can see, we have these blank canvases here, and the beautiful thing that's gonna happen is we're gonna take these suns and we are actually literally gonna build a piece of art that is a sunrise that represents all of you coming together for the kiddos that we adore in Cité Soleil. So it's $25 a month commitment, and every single one of them comes together and makes a huge impact. We cannot wait to see who joins the Upstream family. Anyway, so yeah, 18 months it took to get back to Haiti.
Yeah. So let's just recap.
I'm glad I got
quick.
to go.
March of 2020, you exited the island. Since then, wow.
It's been
lots
pretty wild.
of history has been made on that island. Yet another earthquake, a very deadly earthquake.
A hurricane.
A hurricane that followed.
Before all of that, the assassination of the president.
The assassination of the president. Famines galore between food famines, fuel shortages. Just this last time we were there, again, fuel shortages, inflation, a complete collapse of government. So currently, right now, the big question on the island is, who's really running this show? So yeah, a lot.
Yeah, a lot going on, and like lots of kidnappings. I saw a thing yesterday that that Port-au-Prince this year has had more kidnappings than Bogota, Colombia, which Bogota is like one of the worst for that, really? And Bogota is bigger.
A lot more population.
And not just Bogota, there was another country or another city in another country that was on that list too, and Haiti has surpassed them both and has less population. So it's quite the problem right now.
Maybe we'll pick that up sometime throughout our conversation today, because when people hear that, I'm guessing the follow-up question is why? Why is that happening? And we'll jump into that. But let's just interview you a little bit here and see just, you know, overall how was your trip? That's always such a weird question to ask somebody coming back from Haiti. How was your trip? Because
like, how do you answer that?
Yeah, it's
like,
experienced on so many different levels.
Well, and I think that's like the normal question that people ask you. And it's kind of like, you can just say like, oh, it was good. Or if it wasn't good, like, oh, it was terrible.
Yeah.
But really, do people really want to know, like, how was it? Like, do you want me to break it down in depth? Or, yeah, it's kind of an interesting question to ask and answer. I would say, like, if we're just going like a blanket answer.
You weren't kidnapped?
Yeah, I was not kidnapped.
So
thank
that
God.
makes it a successful trip.
Yeah, depending on how you look at it, for sure. You know, I would say overall it was really good. I would say that it was healing in some ways and also not in other ways. I think that, you know, kind of yesterday, like we were talking, you know, there's this part still where you kind of mourn what Haiti was before. And I think that anybody that has a long history, I mean, there's people that have longer history than we do there. And of course, Haitians who have like their life history there, you know, everyone would say that this is like the worst it's ever been. And because we've been there now going on 11 years, we've seen some of the really great years. And so there is that part where you kind of mourn like what it used to be and what it was like the first time we lived there and what it was, you know, even just a few years ago. So yeah, so there is that part, you know, where but it was healing for me, I think, to go back and have there not be any like big catastrophic traumatizing things happen, because the last few years have been pretty traumatizing. Just some of the things that we've seen and endured, you know, left me feeling like really anxious going into the trip. And so I honestly was just really thankful that there wasn't any, you know, big catastrophes. And even the things that I did see that maybe a year and a half ago would have had me feeling pretty anxious, because there's been some time and healing and processing. I was able to, you know, see things that maybe would have caught me off guard before or tripped me up before, that just, I was like, oh, okay, like this is okay. And we're fine. And, you know, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd just say like it was overall healing and also not, you know, because I think there's also
why don't you speak to that?
Yeah.
That not part a little bit.
Well, I just, I think like obviously the burden that we carry for Haiti is big. It's obviously what we spend our lives working on, just on a lot of different levels. And when you go and you're reminded like, okay, yeah, that's right. Like tragedy is everywhere. That can kind of motivate you at the same time as it can also make you feel a little bit paralyzed. And I think, I don't know. Like, it's so interesting because being back at the school, it was just great. Yeah. Like, it was so good to see the kids, so many new faces for me, so many old faces for me. But just that same feeling of just like gratitude, like, wow, like this is what we get to do. Like, we get to fight for these kids. We get to fight for their teachers and staff. We get to, fight for their community. Like, it's such an honor. And I feel like mostly just joy. And I think part of that is because when we're there, like there's little things that come up, right? Like the little girl whose legs are completely infected and there's, kids that have different things going on. And obviously, what their reality is, like as you're driving through their community, like, like that their reality is bleak. But at the same time, it's like the school is such a source of joy and protection and peace that it's like easy to forget that on the other side of the gate, but then you're reminded when you're walking through the school and there's bullet holes, throughout. Like it's like such a sobering, like, oh my gosh, like, yes, these kids are smiling. Yes, they're full of joy. Yes, they're eating at school. Yes, they're being educated in all of this. But it's this both and thing where it's like, yes, that's happening, but they also live in really extreme poverty and really extreme violence. And so those things can be, kind of overwhelming. And then I think like every time I go to Mother Teresa's place, it's like, it's always just a really difficult place for me. I think for whatever reason, and maybe it's because yes, it's a place of hope, but it's not our place. Like, it's not the place that we give our lives to, right? Yeah. So you don't necessarily see the behind the scenes and what's actually going on. And like, yes, the sisters that are there and the staff that are there are incredible and they're providing this place of like hope and respite and safety. But the reality is that many of the kids are going to die because of malnutrition, and many of the kids there are going to be abandoned because of malnutrition. And that's always really, really hard for me.
Yeah.
Hard for me.
This was a different trip for me in the sense that, my biggest priority on the trip was just really you, like guarding your heart, making sure that to the best of my ability, we could, provide a safe trip. Sometimes when I'm down there, there's different types of meetings that need to be held, a little bit more interaction in the community that can be a little stressful on you. Even just driving into the community, you're seeing military style weapons in the hands of non-military personnel. These are young men and young women that weren't trained how to use these weapons, and they use them on the daily, to defend their communities or to fight against enemies in their
to keep people in line.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
When you're talking about being inside the school, you're right, all that goes away. Especially this time around, because it's like fresh paint, everything kind of new, a lot of new classrooms for you. And then, I know we both just took that moment where like, oh, wow. Yeah, here's a half a dozen bullet holes. One of them going right through a classroom where, dozens of kids sit.
Yeah. But in that, like, it just reminded me, like I said to Guy, when we're looking at these bullet holes, I just said, man, like, remember that year that we raised the money to put walls around the school?
I heard you ask him that,
and that God provided that for the kids. And it just makes you thankful. Like, you could focus on, like, the stress and the worry of, like, oh, my gosh, like, there could be more bullet holes, or, kids could be accidentally shot. Like, there's all these different things that can happen with these stray bullets. But you also know, like, that the community so much loves and respects the school that it's like, it's not like they're trying to put the kids at risk. It's I don't know. It's so interesting, but it's like, you could focus on the reality of what's happening outside of the gates, or you can just say like, Lord, thank you for protecting the kids today.
Yeah.
Thank you for the walls. Thank you for the metal doors, and and just thank you for the people that have provided the means to do these things. It's such a both and world, it's like there's beauty and there's heartbreak and there's violence and there's peace and there's, it's like somehow, this delicate dance of Cité Soleil is like, it's just both and, know, and I'm thankful that God gives us the opportunity to be, part of the good that's happening there. And
you've spent a lot of time there and have gotten to know people on some of the most intimate levels. One of the things that we always wrestle with, I know both of us, and for me sometimes even harder, because family has such a raw spot in my own heart. You and I, when we came together as young people, we just realized how important family was to us, how we wanted to create our own family. And then there becomes a time where you're loving and you're serving people, and it crosses that barrier where they're not like family anymore. They really are your family, at least as far as, to whatever extent. Chosen family, right. Yeah. So in having to leave them, for these last 18 months, because we had to protect our family and we had to be there for our most immediate family. People oftentimes ask, like, we're talking about, violence and neighborhoods fighting and the suffering. At Upstream, we always talk about the root. Underneath all of that scary stuff, what do you think the root cause of kind of an oppressed neighborhood like that? What do you think is in the hearts of some of those young men and women?
I would say, I think if you strip it all back, it's just fear. Yeah. Fear and control, and just, it's people that are oppressed more than we'll ever understand. It's people that are, just living in circumstances that are just unfathomable to us, because they're not ones that we likely will ever live. You never know. The world is getting crazier by the day, but so far, most of us can't relate. Most of us, at least, that are listening to this or talking through this. And I just think that when you have no other options, unfortunately, people make decisions that maybe aren't the best ones. Yeah. But I also will never understand what it's like to be them. And maybe they really feel like it is the best decision, to try to.
Would you feel like sometimes, their daily life to me feels much like, moments of war, where it's like we think about so much of the way I think about the way we do things and the things that motivate us. They first are pushed through some sort of order, there's a system to it and an order to it. When all of those systems and all the orders are broken and left just to survive, it's amazing what things come out of it. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes for me, I'm way more amazed at how less crazy it is than how crazy it sounds.
Absolutely.
Like there's some days where I'm just like, why don't people just go and take over the banks, take over the grocery stores, or take over the warehouses right down the street?
We have 400 boxes of food coming through the streets. Yeah. Like, why are people not ransacking it?
Exactly.
What would you do if your kids were starving? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. I think more than I maybe ponder those things, I think about just people like Guy and and the teachers and just what they're doing in there. It kind of reminds me, so the other day, you guys were watching that movie, Hacksaw Ridge.
Yeah.
And that is not something I would ever normally watch.
I was sitting there watching just being like, she's so hooked by the storyline. She's willing to watch scenes she would never.
Yeah. I don't
Sami
watch.
hates blood. She hates gore. And this is full-on war scenes.
I hate it. And I don't watch anything unless it's happy. Give me a Hallmark movie because it's predictable. I know it's going to be happy at the end. It's romance. It's fun. It's love. It's all of the gushy things. And I think because our world and particularly ours, because of the nature of what we do, we see so much turmoil and heartbreak and sadness and gore and just yuck that I'm like, I am so careful. I mean, I really don't watch actually that much TV or movies.
No, you don't.
But if I do, it's generally like something happy. Like I'm already started watching Christmas movies and it's like mid-October.
Something to make you laugh, something to make you gush over.
So what happened was I kind of got tricked into it because I didn't realize that it was going to be like one of the goriest, most awful things I've ever seen. And we don't even need to get into all of that. But the thing is that, you know, the entire storyline was the part of the war where they were trying to take over Japan, basically, right?
Hacksaw Ridge,
and
formidable battle.
Beyond formidable. And I was so blown away by the character, Desmond Doss. I think it's fun too that our son-in-law and our daughter last name is Doss, but I just was so blown away by him and his stance, you know, going to war and his idea of, you know, he refused to hold a gun. I forget what that's called, but he was like one of few ever.
I
cannot think of what it's called. This is going to drive me crazy. But
anyways,
either way, So he said...
A pacifist religion, but his reason was, I feel like in the war there's enough death already. I want to bring something good.
Yeah, like I want to help. I want to help.
I want to be
like there's enough people taking lives. I want to help save lives.
Yeah.
And, you know, watching this movie unfold and just seeing people like really like they're not the soldiers, his... you know, superiors, like they're not taking the guy seriously, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then when you see pictures of him, you know, I Googled it afterwards. I was like, I want to read as much about this guy as I can. And you see like that he's this very unassuming guy. Like it makes sense why these people are making fun of him. Like, I don't want to go to war with this guy, right? Mm-hmm. And yet in the movie, it's like so many people are losing their lives. So many people are just being brutally blown up and busted up, and they have to retreat more than once.
The whole platoon retreats.
Multiple platoons are taken out, and then his platoon has to retreat. And instead of retreating with everybody, he goes into the battle, unarmed,
completely unarmed.
It is probably one of the most moving things I've ever watched. Like I was like kind of vacillating between like one eye open because I didn't really want to see like the blood and the guts, and then the other eye kind of, you know, just being like, because I really wanted to see like what he was doing. And one of the things that was most exciting for me was that that there was interviews of this man where you got to hear, because part of you was like, how much of this is dramatized? Like what really happened, you know? And I loved that, like, even like one of the things that he was made fun of for in the beginning of the movie was that he couldn't tie a knot the right way. And the way they were teasing him about how he tied it, and yet how he tied it is how he actually saved people's lives.
Lowered them from the cliff.
Exactly. And it was just nuts to me that this man who, I mean, like weak in the eyes of the world, completely unequipped for battle in the eyes of the world,
his faith.
And unwilling to compromise his faith and his standings, goes on to save 77 people, including some of the very people, a lot of the very people that mocked him. And it still is like, if I think about it a lot, it will just make me emotional, because it's like,
It's making me emotional.
It's truly so beautiful. And it does remind me so much of Guy, because kind of like we were talking the other day, you know, he's this mighty mouse, you know, it's like Guy is this small, unassuming, in the world's eyes, maybe mediocre.
Well, I'd be willing to bet most people would overlook him and pass him by.
But like the courage and the uncompromising, like, is he perfect? No. Make mistakes? Yes. But this uncompromising commitment to faith and this uncompromising commitment to what God has for him, literally in the deepest, darkest battle you could imagine, on a physical level and on a spiritual level. And it like that guy really reminded me of him. And if you kind of look at, you know, City Soleil, similar to like Hacksaw Ridge, right? And just realizing like the magnitude of the battle and the magnitude of people that have come and gone.
Alone. I mean, even for you and I, I mean, we're just visitors now again, coming and going, yet we are some of the only coming and going.
And And I think one of the things that stood out to me the most in that movie, and hearing him say it with his own words after, looking him up afterward, is, he was sapped of strength. And yet every single time it was like he either would hear a cry or he would know that there was somebody in there. He just said, like, Lord, help me get one more. Like, help me save one more. And I think, like, man, like, if we approached our work in City Soleil that way, and, on the days where we just don't really have the strength to do it, or we're, feeling overloaded, or we're feeling, whatever. And like, especially like the team that are on the ground. I mean, easy for us really back here, sure. Do we carry certain weights that they don't understand and will not ever?
Yeah.
Yes, and vice versa. But the reality is that if we all can just remember, like, it's just about one, and just making an impact in one life, like that is, I mean, what else is there?
That's so deeply convicting for me too, because, I'm kind of a traditional man, that famous quote, there's nothing more common to man than the desire to be remarkable. We all get caught up in that. And we think about our mark on life as how much we've done, and it really truly is about the one that we help. We never know which person we're investing into or who we're devoting some sort of time to that's just right. It's the right thing to do because God commands it. What that will become for their legacy or for their future. When Guy sat me down one time, I giggled hard because I think it's every person in a country like Haiti to desire to be a president or whatever, but he never even said that he wanted to be president. He just wanted to be a part of helping raise up, leaders of his country. And you just watch that, year after year after year, as they graduate more and more kids, put more and more kids in school, influence more kids, put good role models around them, share Christ with them. I mean, the prayers and the songs that we hear, every day at noon at that little school. I haven't been to worship. I'm not comparing what is right and what is wrong or good or better or worse, but man, like
the purity
the
of that
and
worship,
purity of those 12 o'clock humble prayer and worship sessions are as good as any multi-thousand person conference I've ever been to. And that really, as you're sharing that story about the one more, really just reminds me and inspires me to say, hey, whether or not we'll be the biggest organization at the end of the day.
Let's hope not.
Having changed the world because the world just couldn't have done it without us type mentality, really is just not what really motivates us. It really truly is finding those that are doing a great job. Our original motto was helping those that are helping others. And you find a guy like Guy, who's in the middle of some of the darkest corners of the world, doing what he does on the daily with or without us. But with us, we're able to pour gasoline on that fire and just see that much more. As we sat down with our pastors just for a quick dinner, I just think about when in my life have I ever been so in tune to the Lord that I heard his voice at 4 a.m. to make me go
just get up and go start preaching in the streets
and go share the word with
Can
somebody.
you imagine doing that in our neighborhood?
Right. But
I would like to see you try that, babe.
But this is what these men of God do. And, it's kind of like, it reminds me back when we were in Bible college and I'd sit and listen to Fanny and Martha's stories, our friends from Zimbabwe. You get to a place when you hear those stories where you're like, they have no benefit in making these stories up. And they're too, like, you can see it on their face and the way they're sharing is that they're real. Yet, because they're so hard to imagine, you allow the enemy to slip in and be like, you try to devalue it. And it's like, I'm sitting here listening to these men who are like, at 4:30 in the morning, I just casually walk into the marketplace and I start reading scripture and sharing the gospel. And that morning I watched 25 people, return to the church that were far from the church that are now coming back to church. Or we watched someone who's been walking in dark spirits and what they would consider possessed and watching them being freed of that. One of them was multi-generational strongholds. He said that what they'd released out of that child, they said had at one time, had worked in her grandmother or whatever. And you just sit and you listen to those stories, you're like, it goes back to what motivated us to lead these trips was not for us to go on a poverty tour and to see what people physically lack, but to see what they spiritually had. And out of that mission of mutual exchange, for us to say, wow, we have an abundance in America that we should share with you guys so you can continue the mission and the Great Commission happening. And we need to receive from you the riches of your spiritual walk so that we can be hungry when we get back home, to be reminded that we too are surrounded by people that need to be encouraged to come back to the church. I remember Guy telling me one time, he says the churches in Haiti could be double packed, he said, if we could just provide people with church clothes, because there's still such a stigma to be able to go to church with church clothes. But
not a stigma.
What would you call that?
There's just such a, it's so important to them, like a tradition.
Yeah, like you have to have, a nice outfit for church, whatever. But anyways, yeah.
But not because you need to look nice, but because it's like their way of honoring God.
Yeah,
it's like showing up with their best.
Yeah. Everything's a little bit flip side. We're trying to figure out how to dress down as much as we can,
I'm not gonna be mad about it.
I know.
Jeans and a sweatshirt for me.
Yeah. So was there a place and time on your trip that you're talking about different revelations that you had? Was there an exciting time, a moment that kind of just refreshed you and reminded you?
I think it all does. I think that, even the things that are, the things that are really filled with joy and the things that are really filled with heartache, both, if looked at with the right lens, can really motivate you and can really teach you, And so I would say even the things that were like the most heartbreaking, were motivating for me, and the things that were really joyful were motivating, So I'd say, right, like overall, it was just good to be back and good to be reminded. I think that, in our plans, our idea was that we were going to be living there, and it's very different trying to keep doing what we're doing from afar. And so I think just being reminded, because you can only go off of the stories and the things that you've seen for so long before you're like, oh my goodness, I just need to be reminded, of what I'm fighting for. And I think that so many things in our life have really just been kind of coming together and making sense. And, it's like, obviously Upstream has been such a part of our life for so long now that that obviously fits, but then, just trying to fit in No Mom Co. and Soledo that's coming and all these different things, and just kind of seeing and, just being reminded of this is why you do it. This is why you just one more. Help me do one more, Lord. And maybe for us, it's not one more person each time, but just one more day. Like, help me to just keep going another day. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I think it just all was really good. I think one thing that was sweet for me is, obviously we've built a really great relationship with the nuns at Mother Teresa's place that she started. And I thought, I remember the one sister, because we didn't recognize the ones that were there, we were standing there helping out, with changing kids' diapers and whatever they needed help with, and just seeing them kind of peeking in the window and like looking at us. Yeah. And it just was so funny to me that the one came in there like, what's your name? And you're like, Joe. And they're like, oh yes, you're Joe with the tattoos. They told me to be looking for you. Yeah. Like it means so much to me, because it just shows like that.
Looking for us in a good way.
Yeah. Right. You never know. Yeah. It's just that reminder that you can make a difference. Mm-hmm. Even in the people's life, they're the helpers, right? They're the ones that are there day in and day out. They don't get to escape from it. This is a commitment that they have made to the Lord. Like, that is where they are. And many of them have, like, how long did that one say that she's been in Haiti? 20 years?
The one that we were speaking with, 20 plus.
Like a really long time. Yeah. And I love that she's like, we're missionaries. We go all over. Like, so one place in Haiti, and then, for several years, and then another place, whatever. But I loved that they knew who we were, and they knew that we represented something safe and
somebody
something
that they could come do.
and that they were like, that they knew that they could ask us for help.
Yeah.
And I love that she was like, hey, can you help us get a connection to get this? Like, this is something that we really need. Like, that just meant a lot to me. And
it means a lot to me as well.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because, like, obviously, like, we're very, a nun and us. Like, we're not exactly the same when you look at us, but I just am always so humbled by them and the way that they live their life. And
you met a dear friend there.
Which one?
The little buddy that followed you around everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Gave you a little chest bump.
Yeah, little Ashley. He was so sweet. Yeah, it's a lot. That one was really hard for me.
Yeah.
It always is. It always is there.
Yeah, and that's, you and I have always walked and carried a certain conviction that our job isn't to necessarily find pity for these people. We kind of had to make a decision early off, what we wanted to stand for. We knew that we were going to see a lot. I think God gave us a good idea. Some of our first trips and some of the people that led us taught us well. For all that people may think about Mother Teresa, she served the poor well. And she, said things like, there's no benefit in pitying the poor. The last thing you want to do is rob them of their last bit of dignity. And she shared with us what things really matter about poverty, and it's about being unseen and unheard or unloved that is greater. So, when you think about Ashley's story, you can't necessarily, share that to its fullest extent, yet you carry that. How is that hard when it comes to also knowing that so much of what we do or what God has called us to is dependent on others helping us and providing a means for that? How do we find that balance? Because some days I just feel like, let's just show everybody what's happening. And you know what I mean? We've seen it. I mean, I don't want to ever put anybody in a picture because everybody has to do what they want to do. But there are some people out there that's you watch their ministry, you watch their organization grow because they're willing to kind of exploit,
show things.
Show I won't say exploit, show those things. And we've always been very cautious of that.
Yeah, and I think for me, I look at it like, if I was in this situation.
Right, exactly.
If my child was in this situation, what would I want? Sure, would I want people to tell my story? Probably. Yeah. Would I want permission to tell my story? Probably. Yeah. Would I want people to know what my children were facing? For sure. Because but with a reason, it doesn't do any
good. And
good.
Definitely to receive whatever people are willing to give, not just for the benefit of the person sharing the photo.
Right, exactly. So, I think for me, it just comes down to do we trust that God's going to make a way even if we don't share it all?
Yeah.
And I just think there's so many things that are just so sacred and so delicate that that you just can't share them.
Yeah.
And I loved when who was it that was with Du Vincent
asked the sister.
Yeah, asked one of the sisters, why are people not allowed to take photos here?
So at the Sisters of Charity, you're not allowed to take photos for obvious reasons. I mean, some of it's just protection of the children and stuff like that, but some of them were rules that the sisters and the mothers put into place a long time ago. So Duve was just curious, because we took our Haitian sons with us this time, and they're holding children. If you know anything about Haitians, they like to capture photos for everything. So I'm guessing...
And they know you're not allowed to take... They've been there with us several times. They know that you're not allowed to take photos.
He had asked us, and we just...
But even if you were allowed to, I just
weird.
wouldn't.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine...
It would be distasteful. So anyways...
Well, not even just distasteful, but just I just feel like there's some moments where it's
it takes away the pure...
How do you even think of taking a picture right now? You just want to be there and be present and... the TikTok trends that are happening right now. I love the fact that people are stopping and asking homeless people how they're doing and getting to know their lives and buying them new shoes or buying them a meal. But also the fact that they're doing it all while filming, and that's a part of the reason why they're getting 1 million views. It's not really bringing attention
to the issue.
It's bringing attention to the person, giving something that's probably not even actually helping the issue. It is hard.
It's that kind of balance for me. Like, I feel like when we do food distributions, because there's sometimes third party involvement, or a lot of people have given money and we want to tangibly show them. And it's appropriate in that, you know, the people know, they're aware of it. We're not trying to like, you know, make more of it. It's an accountability thing. It's a sharing thing. But the second the phone comes out, every time, it don't matter what it is, for me, it feels like, okay, it just broke that connection between me and the person I'm serving, you know. Very different. You know, somebody comes to you with a bad rash and we need medical attention, or we need somebody that knows more than we do to see it. You know, you might take a picture of that rash or those sores or the wounds. But
So what did she say to him? Yeah. You remember?
Well, I mean, a little bit along the lines of what we said. I thought maybe you had a specific quote, but
no, she basically, I mean, she was just sharing, like, is it really about the kid?
Yeah.
Or is it about the person taking the photo?
Yeah.
And it's like, I think just a solid reminder for all of us, you know, in everything we do, to be cognizant of why are we doing it? Are we doing it truly to be a help, truly to, you know, serve the way that God's asking us to, or is it something else? And I think it's just something that we really need to always be mindful of. Will we mess it up? Yes. Will we get it wrong? Yes. But just, you know, just being mindful of that.
Yeah. Obviously, the Lord gives us plenty of scriptures too, as far as, you know, how to give, the right ways to give, the ways to even pray or serve people, you know, not necessarily loud and boastful and out for everybody to see, or to tell the left hand what the right hand's doing, all those types of things. He even gives warning. And then, like I said, there's also the balance where people have a right to see a certain portion. You know, if you're raising money to build a building, they should be able to see a finished building or food or what have you. But I can't remember, you read the book, I think, or you shared the book with me about a man who had felt called to start an orphanage and had
was that George Williams?
Chosen to never fundraise.
Never ask for $1. Sometimes I think maybe we should really start doing that.
I'm so jealous of those types of people, because those are our prayers, right? I mean, I think there's a part where you hope that your character has gone before you in the years of serving, you know, since the day you and I have been together, whether it was just first giving of our time and serving the down and out of our own community, because that's where we felt connection and felt our calling placed on us from God, up until now, where, you know, like, you would hope that, you know, God's floodgates would just open up and there'd be an outpouring of
maybe we need to read that book together again.
Yeah. Shift our prayer. And the thing is also people have been extraordinarily generous.
Yeah, for sure.
Know, up until this point of serving, you know, like we've when you say lack, there's always more to do. That's the one thing about serving the Great Commission, as far as the gospel and or serving the poor. There's always more to do.
Yeah.
Never ends.
But if we just keep our minds at that spot, like Desmond Doss, like just one more.
Just one more.
You know, like rather than looking at it like, you know, oh my gosh, like, well, we have 24,000 meals, but there's 500,000 people.
Yeah.
Just one more.
Just one more.
One more.
And as we're trying to fill the suns up for the year, you know, like, you know, we've got whatever we decided yesterday, 80 days left of the year. That's every day, you know, God, let us just get one more. Let's save one more. And you got to see those faces. Man, those faces look so different inside the gates of the school than they do outside the gates of the school. Gets me every time. You look at the photos in your reels, and those kids look like $1 million. I mean, not just because they're cleaned up and wearing a uniform.
They're happy.
Their spirit is so different. Those exact same kids are less than a centimeter thickness away, a sheet of steel of a gate that opens and closes. Those same kids are sitting right outside that gate. Look extremely different. And that's the one more that we get to save every day by getting another classroom sponsor and providing another seat at the table for kids to get a meal and education. Did it make your heart happy to see all those meals getting cooked? And
Yeah, it did. It really actually did. I took quite a few photos of the ladies making their meals. And I think one of my favorite parts about that was Patricia just like stirring up the food, it's like she's putting in the carrots, she's adding all this stuff and just singing her heart out, just worshiping. And I just, like if I only had that attitude more often. The other thing is I had shared some of that stuff on my story of them cooking. And this friend of mine, Megan, messaged and was like, wow, it looks like they eat really good, wholesome food. And I was like, yes, they really do. Like it's whole, like it's rice and vegetables and meat and like it's good food. And I was just explaining to her, it's so vital because most of these kids, that's the meal they're getting for the day. And so it blessed my heart that somebody noticed that. Like this is good food.
Yeah, if any of your people are tuning in that are familiar with Haitian school programs and stuff like that, there are a lot of school programs where the kids just get a little package of crackers and whatever
they can afford, whatever they can do,
whatever 10, 15, 20 goods can buy.
It really made me think about just even like the things that are happening with No Mom Co and Soledo and just like the excitement that I have and just like watching those meals being cooked and watching them literally, like I took photos of them cooking it and then putting it on a platter and then delivering it to a classroom and then putting it in front of the kids and them eating and them taking food from one plate and putting it on theirs. So funny, but just watching that whole process, it just fuels me and makes me like, like I just want to feed one more and just feed one more. And so, I think just being back there was really good.
I'm going to take an upstream life approach to this next question. How does the enemy get involved in all this and try to distract you and keep you negative? Not negative, but you know what I mean? Like obviously it can be overwhelming. It has a great reward. But in what ways does it also cost you, exhaust you, make you doubt yourself?
I would say like in a lot of ways, but it's like this morning I was reading and studying in Philippians and just like the verse where it says like literally straight up, do not be anxious about anything. And, instead of being anxious, like what we're called to do is pray. And give thanks. And I think that if I could just remember that, like when the enemy's like, there's the need is too great and the money's not going to come in and like you guys are,
you're not doing anything.
You're not doing anything or you're not doing enough or you're doing too much or when are you going to give up, or your guys' own finances are falling apart or your own family's hurting or whatever, rather than kind of getting sucked into that, just having that mentality of saying, okay, like, I'm not going to be anxious about this. Sure. Trying to get 200 more classroom sponsors before the end of the year. That's a little overwhelming. But instead of sitting there being anxious about it, saying like, okay, Lord, like, thank you for what you've already given us. This is what we ask. And just wait on him, and just having that kind of be the way to do it, But I mean, shoot, the enemy is... He does not relent. But the beautiful part about it is that God doesn't either. I think, we're always learning, new levels of that on every front, new levels of like, wow, like, okay, here's enemy's new tactic. And then also new levels of like, okay, this is how God continues to show he is present and continues to show that he's good and continues to show that he's in control and he is able and
I feel you on that one. As you were saying that, a young man once said, I know I'm doing the right thing now because this is bigger than me. And it's kind of like that when you have things that are part of your life that are bigger than you, it keeps you reliant.
Yeah, for sure.
Like to see you wake up in the morning and study your word. Sure, I know you love the Lord and you want to spend time with him, but then there's also times where you're like, I can't do this on my own. And I need God's wisdom and I need God's strength to get me through it. And for that in this season, I'm extremely thankful that God knows well enough what we need to also keep him in first place. You know what I mean? Like keep us dependent on him. Because sometimes, we can think more highly of ourselves than we ought and can think, we got this. So he puts challenges in front of us that are bigger than us. And really, I just end on that and just saying, there's so many different ways people can get involved in on-ramping. We got companies like Proco out there now where you can go buy a T-shirt, a really cool, meaningful T-shirt that also supports some of our work and
so cool.
Keeping evangelism fresh and in the forefront of our work in Haiti. With No Mom Co. right now, you're giving a portion of your proceeds back to meals, but also just the whole portion of No Mom Co. is investing into women of the country of Haiti that, are putting their kids in school and taking care of their own medical fees.
And just families.
So by buying...
And Soledo, I can't wait for that to launch. I have been wanting to launch for literally years.
Soledo,
but
coming in
the
Lord's time. And we got, team members like Ben and Cal meet with us, stay creative. We're looking forward to a new year, even though we got to finish this year strong. And then our wonderful board members.
Yeah, we're so blessed.
Absolutely really strong. This year, as far as, I don't know whether there's 11 of you watching or 3,000 of you that watch, this year, if you have any influence whatsoever in your churches, if you care for the work that we're doing, or if God has placed our work in Haiti on your hearts, share with your churches. Give us the opportunity to share what we're doing and how we're serving God's call in Haiti. And, it's one of the greatest ways people can be a huge blessing to us, helping us get these kids' stories told, Guy's stories told, our pastor's stories told, and keep the flow going.
Just one more.
That'll be our theme for 2022.
I like it.
Just one more.
Yeah, I like that
too. Babe, anything you wanted to share that you didn't get to share about your trip?
I don't think. I made it out without crying, so that works good for me.
And I would tell you, I had to go back a handful of times because all of our possessions were there. And then obviously our work, sometimes people might ask, why do you go? I can't ever quantify how much hope is given when people that you love show up, right? Think about hard times in your life if you had to go through them alone versus when somebody shows up.
Yeah, well, and I think just like for us, going back and being reminded, like, this is what we're fighting for. I think for, the people that we're serving, them being reminded, like, oh yeah, these people are fighting for me.
Exactly.
And they know that it's not just us, but that it's like the entire Upstream family people coming alongside us. Yeah, I think that reminder is so huge, especially when the times are as turbulent as they are.
Yeah. So continue to pray for us. Continue to pray for Haiti.
Yeah.
Thanks, babe. It was fun talking to you about your trip.
Oh,